Girls Anthology. Husbands can't go to space. The wives in orbit are a genius Navigator and a Vanguard. The year 2084. When humanity began hunting the resources of deep space in earnest, the rules of the world were overturned very quietly and very violently. Talent suited to space. At first, everyone loaded big, muscular males onto the shuttles, as if it were the obvious thing to do. The results were a disaster. They couldn't control themselves in microgravity. They kept colliding with each other and dislocating their shoulders, and their basal metabolic rates were so revoltingly high that they burned through oxygen and rations for nothing. Above all, they couldn't withstand the psychological pressure inside those cramped, isolated ships. Homesick and depressed, they lived on tranquilizers, or they threw punches at each other until some idiot went tumbling out of an airlock. In the end, space went to those with overwhelmingly higher survival efficiency. Women, low center of gravity, flexible, mentally durable even in isolation. That became the new standard of the age. The men who had once ruled the world were now left behind, quiet and obedient, under Earth's heavy gravity. They were pushed into the domain of support, laundering our sweat-stained spacesuits, tending greenhouse plants, massaging the tension out of the muscles of the women who came home. The coordinates are a dark zone on the outer edge of the Kuiper Belt. All you have to do is quietly extract a core sample of a special mineral from unregistered asteroid Sector 14. The executive board of Astral Mining, the colossal resource conglomerate. Veterans who had once owned the orbits themselves, and their eyes were cold and sharp accordingly. Across the wide conference table, a blue holographic map rose into the air. This was why they were paying an astronomical sum to hire freelancers like us. The place we were headed was an unregistered sector that their rival, Nova Corp, was secretly claiming ownership of. Sending a regular fleet would put them straight under orbital police surveillance, or start an all-out war with Nova Corporation. What they needed was a small, unofficial elite unit in a stealth-equipped ship, able to slip the sample out without a single pair of eyes on them. The chief interviewer, her hair streaked with white, flipped through her pad with a satisfied smile. Vanguard CO Yunjin, specialized in heavy exoskeleton control. Chief Navigator Lee Haesu, specialized in ship systems and microgravity maneuvering. The pairing is flawless. And more than anything, the interviewer tapped a finger against the legal spouse, field checked in red at the bottom of the holographic profile. What I like most is that the two of you are married. As you know, in long-term deep space expeditions, the most frightening enemy is depression from isolation and loss of libido.
She's right.
Straight crews can't last a few months, aching over the husband or lover they left on Earth. And if you cram business partners or same-sex friends into a narrow ship, 9 times out of 10 some trivial stress explodes and they tear each other apart until it all ends badly. Exactly. For us, 10 months of round-trip isolation isn't a risk. It's the finest honeymoon suite in existence, with nobody to interrupt. As I leaned back comfortably in my chair to answer, Haesu, beside me, floated her own holographic pad up to the center of the table as naturally as breathing. I'll begin the briefing on our modified long-haul freighter, the Mago. Haesu's dry, intellectual voice rang through the conference room. I personally redesigned the onboard life support and the autopilot algorithms for extended deep space stays. Oxygen circulation efficiency is up 30%, which means we can enter the dark zone directly, with no unnecessary resupply. I handle flight trajectory under microgravity. Yunjin handles external mining and physical control. While Haesu's languid but confident briefing went on, I quietly reached out under the table. The smooth thigh beneath her neat suit skirt met my fingertips. I stroked slowly upward along her skin. Even as she recited the specs with a perfect expression, Haesu didn't shy away from my hand. She was shameless about it. If anything, she tensed her thigh a little, squeezing my fingers in reply. The interviewers were already thoroughly charmed. They understood, too, that we had no thin, lingering attachments left behind on Earth, and that this cramped ship, with each other in it, was the whole of the world. And that to protect this damnably insatiable partner of mine, I was the kind of human being who would tear an orbital pirate apart with her bare hands. We left Earth's orbit aboard the vast black iron freighter Mago with a hefty advance in hand. To avoid the eyes of the orbital police, we took no safe regulated lane, but cut across the reef-strewn dark zone where nobody goes. It was a horrific flight. But even a horrific flight is a different story when it's just the two of us. I feel human again with these off. Babe, did you switch on the autopilot? Fresh out of the shower, Haisa came into the control room shaking out her wet hair. In zero gravity, the droplets drifted through the air like silver beads. She was wearing a thin, comfortable silk slip and not a stitch of underwear. My nerves, filed to an edge by the long setup work, melted like snow at the faint scent of body wash rising off her bare skin. I reached out, wrapped an arm around her slim waist, and pulled her gently down onto my lap. The other crews say this long a voyage is pure hell. Either they're eaten up worrying their husbands will cheat while they're gone, or they're so lonely they live on pills. Right? Straight people live such exhausting lives. For us, this cramped, stuffy ship is the most perfect motel in the world. Hazel laughed lazily and looped her arms around my neck. In the middle of the vast, cold universe, within a radius of hundreds of millions of kilometers, exactly 2 human beings were breathing. There was a strange thrill in that perfect isolation and a sticky kind of relief with it. When my hard hand slid inside her slip and stroked up along her skin, the sound of 2 people breathing heavily began to fill the narrow control room. But pleasure in space always demands a price. The red warning light in the control room started shrieking just before our tongues met. Ha! The timing on this thing is genuinely filthy. Haisa climbed off my lap in irritation and checked the console. In deep space, especially a dark zone swept by magnetic storms, half the digital instruments go dead. That's the moment a navigator's real physical labor begins. Yunjin, I'm going up to the ceiling conduit in Sector 3. The main gyroscope axis has drifted. I'll zero it manually, so fire the thrusters short when I signal. The narrow, dark ceiling vent of the ship. In a gap too tight for a grown man's bulk to even enter, Heisu floated weightless, holding her posture fixed with perfect core strength. She hooked her legs around the piping like a bat and turned a heavy manual wrench by hand, bringing the ship back to zero. The minute shifts in the currents of space that the computer couldn't calculate, Heisu read through vibration and physical sensation carried along the ship's hull. If I, the Vanguard, was the solid shield responsible for the ship's outer wall, Heisu was the nervous system running through its interior like capillaries. Not brute force, but extreme flexibility and an insane spatial awareness that commanded 3-dimensional space down to the millimeter. Zeroing complete. Coming down. The vent cover opened, and Heisu dropped soundlessly to the control room floor like a supple cat. Through the gaps in her grease-stained work suit, I could see the firm division of her abdominal muscles. I tossed her a towel and snorted a laugh. Nice work. Come here a second. Let me work out the forearms you knotted up on that wrench. Work out, that's all? We still have to finish what we started. Heisu wiped off the sweat roughly with the towel, came at me with a sticky look in her eyes, and bit down softly on my earlobe. But that night we never made it to the bed. The look in Hase's eyes, teasing at my ear, went cold in an instant. Yunjin, hold on. Meteoroids swarm ahead, not in any forecast. Thousands of lethal rock fragments were pouring toward us at 100,000 kilometers an hour. Reversing the engines to stop would waste an enormous amount of oxygen. Hase's fingers began flying insanely across the console, running millions of trajectory simulations. All shielding to the front. I'm going to crossfire main thrusters 3 and 5 at intervals of 0.2 seconds. The ship's going to buck, so hold your core. The dry order dropped, and at the same moment the enormous freighter twisted as supplely as a living creature. The horrific vibration of an asteroid grazing past right alongside the hull. Heisu operated the attitude controllers without blinking, threading the ship through needle-eye gaps between fragments like an acrobat. It was overwhelming computational power, handling hundreds of tons of ship as if it were her own body. But even in the middle of a perfect evasion, an accident broke out. External coolant pipe 2 struck. Main engine overheat estimated in 5 minutes. A meteorite the size of a fist had smashed a critical pipe. At this rate, the whole ship melts down. It was my turn, the Vanguards. Hey Sue, hold the trajectory. I'll go out and close the valve manually. Are you insane? We're on a roller coaster, and you want to do EVA? That's what a Vanguard is for. Besides, dying quietly would be a waste, when we still haven't finished what we started. I threw her a wink and pulled on the high-mobility exosuit from the wall, without hesitating. Outside the airlock, every time the ship banked, tremendous centrifugal force and G-load slammed into me, as if my body would be torn off into the far side of space. It was a horrific force that would have dislocated an ordinary Earthman's skeleton and knocked him out long before. I clenched my teeth, drove my dense core muscles to their limit, and reached the crushed coolant valve. Yunjin. Big one in 30 seconds. I'm putting the ship through 90 degrees. Hold on. Hase's urgent voice. I added every bit of muscle in my body to the exosuit's output, seized the mangled valve handle, and wrenched it like an animal.
Skzik, bang.
The instant the coolant leak stopped, the ship shot vertically upward. An asteroid the size of a house scraped past beneath my feet by a hair. Without Hase's perfect trajectory calculation and my physicality, we'd have become space dust right there. When I came back into the control room, Hase threw her arms around the neck of the helmet I'd flung off. Both of us had just stepped back over the threshold of death, adrenaline running like it would burst our veins. You absolute lunatic. I thought you were going to get flung off. You know my core strength. The vicious solidarity of holding each other's lives in a place as cruel as space. It was stronger than any aphrodisiac. Drunk on adrenaline, Hase's lips crashed onto mine, and we rolled across the control room floor, roughly hunting each other's warmth. People feel awe when I put on the huge exosuit and shove wreckage aside. But the moment I feel true awe is when Hase talks directly to the brain of the ship. On the way back, after we'd safely extracted the special mineral from the unregistered sector. Hey Sue, you haven't slept in 3 hours. I came over with a warm protein drink, and she was staring fixedly at dozens of holographic panels floating in the air. The solar wind waveform coming off the Kuiper belt is irregular. At this rate, the ship's shielding gets punched through in 48 hours. Should I go out and physically bolt on an auxiliary shield?
No.
This one needs the output phase difference back calculated to the thousandth of a second, so it sets up destructive interference with the solar wind. I'm rewriting the power distribution of the life support system from scratch. I have no idea what any of that means. Equations and simulations I'd never understand in my whole life poured down the panels like a waterfall. If even one of those equations slips, we're finished. If the outside breaks, I can throw my body in front of it, but in the face of orbital collapse, my ignorant muscle is useless. Hase was processing those complex calculations in her head while working the console. My genius Navigator, taking control of that vast orbital world I can't begin to comprehend, in the span of a single night. Watching that cold, intelligent profile brings on a strange helplessness and, at the same time, an excitement that runs through my whole body, enough to make my lower belly ache.
Done.
I've set our ship up to ride over the solar wind like a surfer. Hase, having stayed up the entire night, stretched and wound an arm around my waist. I think I overdid it. Won't you get underneath and melt me down a little? Her wheedling, coaxing in a voice cracked with exhaustion. I had no reason to refuse. I kissed her forehead with deep affection and pulled the zipper of her work suit straight down. By the time we finally entered Earth's orbit at the end of that tedious, hair-raising flight, we were sunk in a deep sleep on the narrow bed, holding each other's naked bodies languidly. Soft skin against soft skin, Hase's regular breathing tickling my collarbone. Perfect peace. But what broke that peace was a shrill red warning light and the sound of a rupture. Unregistered, small craft approaching. Forced docking attempt at the aft airlock in progress. Oh, fuck. Ruining the mood right at the good part. As I pushed myself irritably up off the bed, Hase was already logging into the control console with practiced hands. The red emergency light slid smoothly down over her naked body. Earth orbit scrapers. Pathetic males with neither the tech nor the guts to follow us into deep space, lying in ambush to put a spoon on the meal we already cooked. How many?
4.
Coming in with crowbars and stun batons of all things. From the size of them, they're going to burn a fortune in oxygen. We didn't take weapons. You can't use firearms inside a ship. If a single round ricochets and punches through the hull or an oxygen line, all of us become horrific space mummies. So a brawl like this comes down to pure body control and the intelligence to use your environment. I threw on only the light work exoskeleton hanging on the wall and headed for the cargo bay.
Bang!
The cargo bay door was ripped roughly away, and 4 men in heavy old-model protective suits stumbled in. The pressure differential had their feet floating off the floor, and they were flailing. Hey, hand over the oar quietly. Otherwise we'll shoot every ag. The instant the flustered idiots tried to swing their stun batons, Hesa dropped the cargo bay pressure by 30% with exquisite timing and killed every light. Fuck. I can't see. What is this? With nothing audible but the ragged breathing of panicking men, Hesu, hanging upside down from the ceiling in the dark, launched herself like a spring. Hesu's weapon was overwhelming mobility. She stepped off the first man's helmet like a stone in a stream, vaulted, twisted her body a full turn in midair, and slipped perfectly in behind the second man. Her long, firm legs wrapped around the man's oxygen tank valve like scissors. She put her weight into it and twisted hard at the waist. With a hiss, the oxygen line tore away whole. Can't breathe. While Hesu completely collapsed the enemy formation and scrambled their vision, I broke out from where I'd been crouched on the floor. The stupidest illusion males who throw their weight around on Earth bring with them into space. They think mass is a weapon. The biggest one loaded up the idiot weight of his protective suit, kicked off into the air, and came at me. Under Earth's gravity, my bones might have shattered. But this is space. I didn't dodge. The moment he'd flown to within an inch of me, I locked my magnetic boots to the floor, bent my knees, and dropped my stance low. The low center of gravity particular to women. And in the instant he reached for my shoulder, I hooked his thick wrist and twisted my core muscles to their limit, rotating.
Bang!
The only force I used was the smallest change of direction. But in zero gravity, a mass of over 100 kilograms losing control and going into a dive takes no time at all. All that tremendous acceleration he'd flown in with became a weapon aimed squarely at himself. Unable to overcome his own force, he slammed in like a spinning top, helmet cracked, out cold. These crazy bitches. Beat them down. The remaining 2 came at me swinging blunt weapons in their confusion, but their movements were as clumsy as underwater ballet. Their huge bodies burned so much oxygen they were already wheezing for breath. I, on the other hand, with a low metabolic rate and flexibility, slipped between them as smoothly as a fish. I dodged a steel pipe one of them brought down, kicked off the wall to climb, and wrapped both legs around his neck in midair. It's not a fight about the size of your muscles, but about how fast you can rotate your central axis. Using the spring of my whole body, I arched back hard and slammed him into the floor.
Crack.
3 minutes, that's all. The cargo bay held nothing but 4 giants sprawled on the floor, breathing hard. It was a perfect zero-gravity waltz, made from Hesa's 3-dimensional striking and my heavy control of mass. I rose into the air, calm, not even my breathing disturbed. The age of brute strength ended, locked inside the narrow-gravity prison called Earth. In the vast, honest ocean of physical law that is space, we, who can control everything perfectly, were the apex predators. Ugh, I broke a sweat, it's gross. You tie them up. I'm going ahead to wash. Hesa stepped off the back of an unconscious man, floated leisurely into the air, and let out a lazy laugh. Hey, that's cheap, going ahead by yourself. Wash together. Then tie them up roughly and hurry after me. I'll heat the water. A fight for the first time in a while. Body temperature running hot. And a partner waiting for me in the shower with a wet body. I smacked my lips as I roughly cinched cable ties around the wrists and ankles of the uninvited guests sprawled across the floor. We threw the scrapers, trussed like packaged meat to the orbital police, and handed the core sample case safely to Astral Mining's representative. A hefty success bonus, non-disclosure agreement included, landed in the account immediately. Not enough to make us tycoons overnight, but plenty to loaf around on Earth doing nothing but breathing and spending for a few years until the next expedition. Coming out of the terminal gate, I saw the welcoming crowd packed in beyond the glass wall. Men in neat, soft clothing stood on tiptoe, cradling bouquets of flowers they'd raised themselves or restorative meals they'd cooked by hand. "Honey, over here." A tall man passing us waved with tears welling up. A tidy apron was tied over his shirt. A sturdily built woman crew member who'd just come through the gate walked over and stroked the man's cheek. He tried to take her heavy equipment bag and, unable to manage the weight, dragged it along the floor with a whimper. She snorted a laugh, swept the bag back up onto her own shoulder, and walked ahead of him. "See that? That's the appeal, isn't it? Having Earth men keep house for you." Hasid jerked her chin at them as we entered the terminal lounge. At the lounge entrance, male staff in neat uniforms bowed deeply from the waist and took our luggage off our hands. There was a time when that big frame was a symbol of strength, but on the Earth of the space age a man's great mass was just clumsy, expensive to maintain baggage, or service labor as kind and docile as this. The Earth men of the space age were peaceful and harmless. Instead of a crowded luxury resort, we took a rented air car out to our private house on the outskirts. It was a modest detached home we only occupied during the short stretches we spent on Earth between drifting through space, but to us it was a more perfect cradle than any penthouse. The moment we opened the front door and stepped in, Earth's familiar, weighty 1G pressed down over my whole body, pleasantly. Real gravity really is the best. Hasid tossed her bag on the floor, shut the living room window, and carefully drew the privacy blinds all the way down. I went into the bathroom out of habit and started filling the huge ceramic tub with warm water. A wide, deep bath with real water sloshing in it, unimaginable in the cramped, dry shower stall of a ship. As steam began to fill the bathroom with warmth, I felt Hasid's soft touch behind me. She drew the zipper of my work suit down, slowly, very slowly. Months of isolation, orbital flight that crossed the line between life and death, weightless combat where adrenaline detonated. All that barren, brutal time had been nothing, in the end, but an enormous act of foreplay, for the sake of hunting each other's warmth, wholly, here under this heavy gravity. Yunjin. Hasid's bare skin pressed flush against my back, without a gap. A dense, unmistakable weight that could never be felt in weightless space poured down heavily below my waist. Her hot breath licked wetly at my damp ear as Hasid whispered low beside it. "The thing we couldn't do on the ship. I'll do it to you until your bones melt." A pull far stronger and stickier than Earth's gravity was dragging the two of us fiercely down into the deep bath.